to do, and I'll admit everybody. Good morning, everyone. See lots of familiar names and faces and some brand new ones. Hi, Lisa. It has been a minute.
Hi, Cheri.
Oh, it's good to see you.
You too.
So while we're waiting for people to show up, if you will, we wanted to let you know that we are recording this. So people who are interested but can't make it, excuse me, will be able to have the recording. So when you are sharing things, don't use people's names. And if you would type into chat where you're from and one thing you hope to take away from the session today. So in chat, where are you calling in from? And one thing you're hoping to take away, excuse me. And Amber, you're driving, so be safe. So Michigan, you are in ice and snow out there. Hope you're safely tucked at home.
Ontario. So cool. Icy there too.
Yes, Wilmington, North Carolina, Berkeley.
Wow.
Janie, I appreciate that you are sharing the land that you are occupying.
Hi, Christina.
We sit on the Cherokee land. And from Cincinnati, no, Knoxville, Tennessee. We used to live over there in Maryville. Oh, from Santiago, Chile.
Hi.
Wonderful. Hello.
Far away.
Yes. Yeah. Far away, but right now very close. Very close. I love that. I'm open to be surprised. Conversations for chaotic situations, personal and difficult conversations, insights to share with clients.
Right, and responding less emotionally. Yes.
Yes, Ontario, you've got ice as well. Great, wonderful.
Christina, you shared wanting to learn more about trying to maintain connection with challenging people. Oh, yes, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I just realized I was on mute, but yeah, like I'm thinking about personality disordered people, you know, those with certain tendencies, especially narcissism, and then those who just don't have the emotional intelligence to really go deep with you.
That's great. Thank you. Right. So really looking at what can we do to still be in connection.
Yeah, that's a really great situation to work to. Wonderful. So should we get started? And let me just first introduce myself, Cheri Torres, and I do consulting and training in the area of organizational culture and communication. Conversations Worth Having is kind of completely shifted my focus and helped focus my whole frame of reference for what I do. Feels like that's something that wants to come into the world, and I am simply saying yes to what wants to emerge. So, and I love that I'm working with my daughter, Laura.
Yeah, me too. I was going to name that. We're mother and daughter. It's really cool to get to be doing this with you. And my name's Laura, and I'm a therapist and a coach in Asheville, North Carolina. And yeah, I'm really excited to be applying some of the conversations worth having framework with our relationships, because I feel like that's the place for me anyways, where I tend to get most kind of taken off my axis and out of my connect space. So I'm excited to get to play around with some of the tools and applying them to challenging relationship situations. Thanks for being here. Mom, is there anything else you wanted to say for people?
No, I think we could
Yeah,
jump into the presentation and situations.
great. And one more quick thing. If you have questions, we'll be trying to monitor chat. And also if you can keep yourself on mute, for now, and just post questions in the chat, that'd be great. Okay. Great. So I'm going to start out by sharing the slides here. Let's see. Here we go. Can you all see a slideshow? Okay, thumbs up. Great. So let's see. Okay, so we wanted to start by first asking, oh, I see a raised hand. Let's see. Let's unmute. Oh, I'm learning the technology.
If your hand's raised, go ahead and unmute and just ask your question.
Oh.
Maybe somebody was just raising their hand in response to, can you see the slides?
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. So yeah, we would love to get your all's input first, when we're we'd love to hear from you all around what do you want for your relationships? And you could kind of do your relationships as a whole, or focus on maybe one particular relationship that you want to focus on, whether it's relationship with a partner or a relationship with a child or a friend or colleague, some type of relationship, and think about what you want for this relationship. Is it that you want to navigate conflict more easily? Do you want more deeper emotional intimacy? Do you want to feel more understood? So take a moment and type in the chat, if you will. What do you want for your relationships? And Mom, always feel free to add anything as I'm.
Okay. Yeah, of course, and vice versa. To feel safe and be vulnerable. Yes. That's probably a universal.
Yeah, and Kate, to soften my hard shell within my relationships.
Authentic sharing.
Openness, honesty, trust, feel heard. Yeah, rebuilding trust, greater capacity, clarity, and connection to feel valued, give a voice. A willingness to engage when something is bothersome, like turning towards one another. Love that. Right? Because when we're triggered, we kind of want to turn away. Okay, smooth and open conversation, expressing feeling in a loving way. Oh, yeah, that's great. Okay, so next, to make others feel valued. Yeah, what gets in the way for us about having these things we want in relationships? We'd also love if you would type into the chat, what tends to make it hard to have more open and easeful connection, or to express feelings in a loving way, or feel heard, seen? And you can go ahead and type in the chat as you think about what gets in the way of these things that you want in your relationships. Rushing. Yeah, being really busy. A lack of awareness at the time. Concerns about consequences. The other person not opening up. Emotional hijack. Yes. Yeah. Good one. Expectations and personal experience. Yeah, kind of expecting the other person to respond in a certain way. Ego, lack of margin. Oh, married to a micromanager, but a fantastic person, right? Some of the other, that's great. The other person's patterns, right? Get in the way. A colleague's one-up you attitude, right? That other people's, these are all really good points. The other people's attitudes and patterns often trigger our own attitudes and patterns. Oh, phew. Did you see? Okay.
Yeah, I got him.
Thank you. So time, caring for an elderly mother, not being as available, past resentments, fear of rejection. Yeah, so a lot of these things. Thank you. Not being able to finish a thought, like being interrupted. That's great. So, right, a lot of these are really pointing to what happens for us when we don't feel safe, right? Where we go into more of a protect nervous system state. And it's really hard to have the types of conversations and create the types of relationships we want when we're coming from a protect space, which we'll talk about a little more in a minute. Let's see. Okay.
So one of the things to to think about when we're in relationships is we've all been conditioned, excuse me, for much more transactional relationships. If I do this for you, then I'm going to earn your love. So if you can recall for a moment, a time when someone gave you a gift or a card and you did not have one to give to them. Just get a sense of what that feels like. Or if your partner says, I love you, do you feel the need to say that back to them? That's part of that transactional conditioning, is that it's a give and a take. And it kind of embeds in us this sense of, if I'm good enough, I'll be loved. If I do the right things and I behave the right way, then I can belong in the culture. And this tends to leave us feeling isolated and that we have to work to be accepted. And so it also has us sometimes hiding the parts of ourselves that we really want to share. People talked about, I want to be vulnerable. I want to have authentic relationships. And this can get in the way of that because of the fear that if I show these other parts, that I might not belong or I might not be loved. And we are individual people, but if you can go to the next slide, we are also part of a whole living system. If we think of the world as a living being, a living system, and we are an integral part of that, all our interactions are either contributing to the health and well-being of the system or not. And like a spider, it's an individual entity, but without the world around it that it can hook its spider web to, it would starve to death. And the plants, the trees, those things which support a spider web are their own individual, but they play a significant role in supporting the life of the spider. And so if we think of our relationships as both, we have this individual sense, but that we're also part of this larger fabric in one-on-one intimate relationships, in our families, in our organizations and communities. And if we can adopt this both and mindset, embracing parts and wholes at the same time, then like the spider and the plant, we don't have to feel like why isn't the plant growing here? Or the plant saying, I'm tired of holding up this web. I'm doing all the work here. I'm just going to let it go. It's not. It's this dynamic system that that is interactive. And it can be hard when you get triggered to consider both the whole and the parts. And that is the dance that we can, if we can invite ourselves into that almost seems like a contradictory consciousness level of, yes, there's an ego and myself, and I'm an integral part of a whole. And in building my relationships, how do we do both? How do we make it a both and?
Okay. So kind of like what we were talking about before, one of the most important pieces in being able to have the conversations we want to have and build the relationships is recognizing where we're at. Like if we're in a nervous system state of protect, we're not in a place where we tend to be in a more of a self-focused, like, what do I need to keep myself safe or to take care of myself? And so oftentimes we're not in a space where we have a sense of the whole and our interconnection. And so this can look it can look kind of more extreme, like fight, flight, freeze. And it can be subtle, like how we can, have some subtle judgments or righteousness or annoyance. So doesn't always have to look like a massive shutdown. And so, another good reminder is, I think our system's response to protect happens for a reason, because we don't feel safe. And it's really hard to have the types of conversations and the relationships we want to have when we're acting out of, when our protective parts are in the driver's seat. So we're going to be doing a little bit of talking, like part of the practices we're going to be talking about today, even just the awareness that our protect is in the driver's seat can help shift us out. I mean, we could spend like a whole day-long workshop on like, how do we shift out of protect into connect? But the practices we're talking about will also help shift us out. Okay, so we're all wired for protect. And we're also all wired for connection. And I think this is really important to keep in mind, because we all carry pain and hurts from, someone had mentioned like past resentments and hurts in specific relationships. And we also all carry resilience and wisdom and an ability to kind of move toward connect, even if part of us wants to shut down and wall off. So part of it is the kind of the willingness to like choose that, like, what do I need to choose connection? And what does that look like when I start to get curious about that? So I want to share an example of a story so we can kind of help integrate some of the concepts. So a couple of summers ago, I was paddleboarding with my partner and our 9-year-old son, and I didn't realize it. We were like on this beautiful lake. It's a beautiful day. And about 30 minutes into the paddleboard, my partner like yells at me in a really harsh tone, like, hey, get over to this side of the lake. And, my whole nervous system is like, oh, like I just got yelled at. Yeah, I'd love to. Well, so we won't, but, these are some of the things we might notice when all of a sudden we, someone talks to us in a harsh tone, or we get a what feels like a harsh look, and that we might go to like, what's wrong with, like that person's being so mean, like judging them or feeling like scolded and small. Like these are all of our protect parts coming out in a moment where we don't feel safe. And oftentimes those happen in a split second, and then we respond out of the protect part, right? Instead of slowing it down and pausing. So We're going to talk about the first habit that's part of this conversation's worth having practice is tuning in. So it's like in the moment where we notice, and someone had mentioned hijack earlier, like, oh, I'm hijacked. Like building that practice of noticing in that moment, like, ouch. And then taking a moment to pause. And then taking a deep breath. And when we breathe, I know probably most of us hear about breathing a lot. And it's really a powerful way to access our parasympathetic nervous system to kind of start to bring some of those protect response, bring the cortisol down. Taking a breath kind of signals to our body, like, I'm safe in this moment. And then we can get curious, like, what's happening for me? So in that moment, I actually didn't respond this way. I got carried down the track with this. But in that moment, had I tuned in, I might have taken a breath and noticed, like, ooh, that didn't feel good. And then I would have looked over and noticed, like, like I am really far away. And I might have gotten curious. I wonder what's happening for Todd, and like, is he upset? Or, there would have been a little more space to really ask some of these questions and have a bigger context versus just kind of be in my own protect response. And so I'll hand it over to you, Mom, to continue.
Okay. And then there are two very simple practices. They're not always easy, especially if you've been hijacked. But the two simple practices are asking generative questions and using a positive frame. And a generative question is a question that changes the way you or other people think. So for example, in Laura's situation, by pausing and saying, I wonder why is he yelling? And then noticing, I'm really far away. I wonder what's going on. So the generative question helps make the invisible visible. So once Laura gets back over to Todd, she might ask, I realized I was really far away. What's going on for you? And then he has the opportunity to share, we're here together as a family and you're off there by yourself. As opposed to coming at each other from both people just seeing themselves. And so in that capacity to be open, make the invisible visible, there's an opportunity to continue to ask questions to create shared understanding or to generate new knowledge and inspire possibilities. And then the positive framing is simply, it really is talking about what you want instead of what you don't want. It's very easy in intimate relationships to try to fix the other person or to try to fix things so that they work for you. And a positive frame would be talking about what is it that we want for ourselves? What do we want together? If there's a problem, how can we flip that so that we focus on desired outcomes for both of us? And again, that's going to require asking generative questions. What do you want from the relationship? How do I support what your needs are? And we support each other's, both of our needs going forward. And sometimes if you've been completely hijacked, you cannot do this in the moment. You have to go away, as all of us, I'm absolutely certain, have had to do. And to do that for yourself and allow your partner or whoever you're talking to do the same thing. Because once you've had a significant dump of cortisol and testosterone into the system, the brain can't access the prefrontal lobe, your emotional intelligence, your capacity to connect or be too creative in the relationship. So being compassionate with one another and saying, let's revisit this. And just doing that, giving each other permission, can sometimes immediately stop the dump of those chemicals and then remember to come back to it.
Mhm. Awesome. Let's see. Okay, so we want to take a moment and practice with a scenario, and then after this, we'll kind of ask you all for some scenarios. So this is our opportunity to kind of work with some of the practices we just talked about together. So we would love for you to type in the chat. And so first, here's the scene. So imagine you are, at home, it's been a long day, you've worked, you're home with the kids, you're trying to cook dinner, your kids are doing their thing, but trying to interact with you, and your partner comes home from work, you give him a hug, he says hello, and then he goes to the living room and sits down and starts checking his phone, while you're doing all the cooking and multitasking. So take a moment and type in the chat, what do you imagine might be happening for you first? Like, what would happen once, as I described this scenario? What might you be noticing about yourself? Or what would tell you you were triggered if you were triggered? Assumptions. Yeah. Like, is he angry? Heart rate increases, frustration, feeling anxious. Like, is he mad at me? Or I'm frustrated. He doesn't care about me. I'm not valued. Yeah. Just a lack of acknowledgement. Oh, this is a pattern. Yeah. Negative thoughts towards him. Like, what a jerk. He's so selfish. Annoyed. And then, I think it's hard when we're annoyed, and we can feel we're annoyed. It can be hard to express out of that place, feeling ignored. Yeah, I'm still thinking of work and not us. Yeah, that's great. So now take a moment and just imagine, oh, yeah, I like more than a hello. Yeah. He seems to feel the need to rest while I'm running around. I may get a rush of energy signaling a reaction. Yeah, that's great. So take a moment and imagine pausing, like noticing, oh, this doesn't feel good. Take a deep breath. And then what happens when you start to get curious? Curious about both your experience, his experience, what you're needing, what you want to be happening, and type in the chat, like, what are some of the things you're curious about? And there are no wrong answers here. We're all just kind of playing. Yeah, wondering how his day was. Yeah, like maybe he's really stressed about something. Yeah, right, to the whole systems. Like, what is happening? And what do we want to be happening? Wondering if he notices. Maybe he didn't notice that I was like multitasking and doing all the things. I wonder if something happened in his day that he's still distracted or taken care of. So that's great. Like, even in the tone of the questions, there's even some natural, when we get into a more of a connect space, there's more natural compassion and curiosity. Am I seeing? Like, what was happening for him that he didn't notice? Why does this why is this a pattern? And that, I think that brings up a really great point of when something is a pattern, that's a great opportunity to have a conversation like, let's do this differently. This feels familiar and it doesn't move us towards each other. It's like a familiar disconnect for us. So how can we do this moment differently? Wonder what's still needing his attention. Yeah, so this is like natural assumption of goodwill that happens when we're in our own connect space, that we're like, huh. And I think it's a good reminder that we all want to be in connection. So when any of us aren't, there is a reason. And how do we move back towards connection? See, dealing with an emergency. Yeah, ask for help. Sometimes people don't know when we need help. That's really a great point. And sometimes we don't even think, it's like, oh, I could just ask, hey, when you finish doing that, will you come get the kids so I can cook without them trying to get my attention? Yeah, I would need to express my frustration before being generative. Lisa, I'm so glad that you said that. And that's such a good point. Because, as I was like running through the scenario myself to prepare, one of the things that came up for me was and this happens for me sometimes, where I don't get into a connect space first, or I haven't gotten to express my frustration. And so I'm trying to just jump to curiosity and generative questions. And it comes out as passive aggressive and controlling. I'm like, why are you in the living room? Yeah, I guess there's probably something pretty important you're doing on your phone, and it just comes out as kind of sarcastic. It does not create more connection. So that's a really good point. Sometimes it might be saying like, hey, I feel frustrated. You didn't notice how busy I am. And what's happening for you? Did you not notice? And that it can be a both and, where we can name our protect parts and also say, and I want to feel connected tonight. I don't want to stay in this part. So, right, I know we're already even asking some of the generative questions. What other questions might you ask kind of directly? So you might ask for help. You might say, hey, I feel frustrated. I can just notice I got triggered. What are some other generative questions that you might ask? You might ask what's happening for you? I mean, I think, it's interesting when we get curious, naturally generative questions come up for us. Are there any other questions that come up as we've been thinking about this? You can type it in the chat. As you're thinking, I think that's one of the benefits of tuning in. And like one of the generative questions, when we get curious and notice what's happening for us, we can bring the background into the foreground. And that is like, I'm frustrated. I'm going to bring this into the foreground. So now it's here in the room and things can be congruent. It's not this like, I'm going to hide my frustration, but try to be nice. And then there's some weird vibes happening and they're responding to that, but we're trying to be nice. So, okay, so the last piece of this practice is finding a positive frame. And so it might be, thinking about the situation. If part of the ouch is like, oh, I feel alone, a flip might be like, and again, I know this is still like an I focus, but a flip might be like, I don't feel alone. And so what are some positive, even a bigger positive frame for that? Could be something like, I really feel like my partner and I are a team when it comes to managing the kids and both of our jobs and the housework. It's kind of a frame for like, this is what we're wanting to create together. Do other folks have ideas of a positive frame in this situation? Or Mom, is there anything else you want to say about that?
Only that when you're thinking about what's the positive frame here, that's when you really need to broaden out into the whole system. Because if you're just trying to create a positive frame for yourself, you're not inviting the other person into a conversation that also helps them feel nourished and whole. And so what's the positive frame? So Laura's example of I want us to feel like a team, to maybe even say to your partner, is feeling like a team something that would align with what you'd like for our relationship? That when we're together as a family, and that might spark well, no, I don't really want to feel like a team. I really want to feel just connected and whole. Yeah, me too. That's a much better way to say it than a team. So can we have a conversation about how we do the transitions from work to family in a way that has us feel like we're a connected whole? Now you've invited the partner into a frame that really fits the kind of frame you want as well. Now you're in a conversation that has the potential to stop a pattern, but to stop it from a generative place to shift the pattern towards a pattern that supports what you both want, instead of trying to fix each other into a pattern that meets individual needs. Does that make sense? Yeah. This is why it's simple, but it's not easy, because it's a real shift in the way we think. For example, Laura, can you just share briefly what you might have done, you and Todd might have done differently in terms of a conversation you could have had before you even got on the lake together, that would have created a whole different interaction.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's, if we had both, while we were driving in the car on the way to the lake, talked about like, what are our best hopes for this lake time today as a family? Like, what's important to both of us? And we might have had some different hopes. Like, I just want to get out and like go at my pace and feel like free and easy. And he might have said, well, I also want to feel, I want that for you. And I also want to feel connected as a family. Like, how might we do this both together? But so often we don't even know we have expectations until they don't get met, and then you're triggered. But you don't have to get all of your expectations exactly the same. It can be more of like, how do we like hold this great? Like, I want your needs to get met and mine, and I want to all do this together and feel connected as we do it. Yeah, Julie said, yeah, if we can work through this, we can better manage similar situations. Oh, I love that frame. Like, the frame is like, we can work through these small disconnects. And I think the better we get at this, we'll be able to do it in other situations.
Yeah.
Great frame. Let's see. I'm not alone. My partner's around and he needs time to himself. Mention the degree. Share. Yeah, share what both of you, what you're noticing, needing, and wanting. Yeah, kind of opening a dialogue of like, what's happening for you? Here's what's happening for me. What do we both need? I often think it's better to deal with something when it's not happening, especially if it's something that's hard to talk about. That's a great point, and kind of goes to like, if we can feel like I am just livid inside, it's better to take space as opposed to try to address it in the moment. I think, and then the trick is to remember to come back to it. Like, hey, I had a moment earlier, that I want to talk about now that I'm calm. Because I think, sometimes we can just let moments go and then they kind of build up without us knowing too. Yeah.
I also think that the more you practice, and I think, DB, that this is why it's simple but not easy, but the more you practice that calming the nervous system so that you can bring your whole self to the interaction, the easier it gets. And the neural system, the amygdala, starts firing so fast, because typically when it fires, there's no saber-toothed tiger. It's our ego, or our fear. We're not being loved. We're not being seen. Our voice isn't heard. It doesn't matter. And you can train your whole nervous system not to react as if it's going to die. And instead, yes, I'm part of a much bigger system. I'm an integral part. That over time you become less reactive. And then in the moment, you can come from a place of connection and empathy more easily, which doesn't mean your partner can, but you yourself might be able to.
Yeah. Well, and I think, a point of that is, even if we still react, we have that moment. It's like building the capacity, our resilience to like unhook pretty easily. Like, oh, and now I'm unhooking. And what I was going to say is forgot to say earlier, but that our nervous systems, as we're all interconnected, they're not closed systems. Like we actually entrain to each other. So, when we're in a protect space, our partner's feeling it, it's affecting them. So the more easily we can get and stay into a regulated, more connected space, it is actually supporting the people around us and being there as well. And equally, they're kind of pulling us out when they're still in a protect space. And it's like, so building those skills and capacity to stay connected and regulated when the people around us are in protect or triggered, that's hard, but it's also really freeing the better you get at it. Yeah. Right. I once heard Tara Brach say, with all the Buddhists, she's a Buddhist psychotherapist, but she says, no, I still get triggered. But she's just like, I'm able to kind of come back to center more easily. Like, we'll still get triggered.
Very natural. We're wired that way.
Yeah. And there's a reason that it's like, oh, ouch. They picked up their phone while I was talking to them. Ouch. But to be able to unhook from that. Have grace for the other people in the conversation. Yeah. I also think really like you doing the practices. I mean, I love that. Mom, you said, Christine, he can watch the video, but the more that we are doing the practices, it's like we're modeling that and not intentionally, we're just doing them. And I think that's the best way of like, that someone can see like, wow, you're really like staying in an open, loving place. And people want that.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
How are you doing that? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So are we ready to
I
practice?
think so.
Okay. Great. So I'll just put the whole sides up here. Mom, are you facilitating this part?
Sure. So we're just gonna have you type into chat if you have some situations you're like, well, this sounds good, but how would you do it in this situation? So type into the chat if you have a scenario or a scene, and it would be best not to use names here.
Yeah.
Just refer to a partner or a child or a colleague. And then together, we're going to apply the practices to tune in, pause, breathe, and get curious, and to ask yourself a few questions. What's happening for me? What's going on? What am I noticing? And then also, what am I noticing in the broader field around me? The system that I'm part of. And then asking generative question, what's happening for him or her? What does she or he need or want right now? Are there other possibilities that might explain what just happened? We are really good at making up stories. We have like a handful of facts and we fill in all the blanks with our own stories. And so what are other stories that could explain what just happened? And then using a positive frame, which might be, I want to feel more connected, or I want to be part of a team. I want it to feel like a whole. And then what questions can you ask to start that conversation? So we have a number of scenarios. If you all don't have any specific ones that you'd like to bring up, but we'd like you to have the opportunity to say, please help me with this. How would we handle this situation? Oh, Lisa, and absolutely, humor is such a valuable, and humor that's coming from a genuine place of connection and love. Absolutely. Humor that's coming from the fight or flight part of your brain is going to come off as sarcasm or cynicism. So again, it's being aware of, am I congruent with my humor in this situation, or am I being snarky? Thanks, Jennifer. Knowing a friend is bothered with me, but she's not opening up to talk about it. Thank you, Christina. So a friend is being bothered about something that you're doing and they're not open. So let's just start with tune in. What's going on for you? And if you want to just unmute and share, and Christina, maybe you're the person to share, when you know your friend's bothered and she's not opening up, what's going on inside for you? If you'll unmute and just share that.
Yeah, so what's going on for me is curiosity and a willingness to learn more, to hear more, to reconnect, to repair. But I can't do that if the other person is not willing to go there with me because they're on protect mode. But I'm maintaining my composure. I'm not anxious. I'm not overdoing it with the engagement with her. But she's not turning towards or opening up. You know, she's there every once in a while. Boundaries are being set. But my friend and I went through a situation, and we just unfortunately were not able to come together in a way to repair what happened. And I was trying, and I think she was trying, but she wasn't recognizing her part in the engagement and willingness to share more deeply about what she was thinking and feeling until much later on. And at that point, more had just happened. So when you're in a situation where you're trying to engage, you know, reasonably, not overdoing it, but the other person is perhaps still on protect mode, you can tell they're distancing, they're not turning towards, you know, and you're asking all the needed and right questions and sharing from your heart space. But if the other person is just not willing to go there with you, or if they're focused more on other stuff and not themselves, if they're more focused on you and not themselves or the collective friendship, you know, how can you work with that? You can't work by yourself.
Right. Great question. Thank you, Christina. So what ideas, yes, Lisa or DB?
I was once in a situation where a friend was really, really angry at me. And it was something I did, or also something she thought I did. Anyway, we were on the phone and I was just listening, and I might have tried a couple times to explain or say something. And then I just realized she is too angry to have a conversation about this. So I asked her, I said, are you too angry to have more of a conversation about this? And she said, yes. And so I just said, well, why don't you, call me when you are able? And she said, great. And so, at some point, I don't think it was that much time. She called and then we could talk about it. I'd never done anything like that before, or maybe since, but the time was just a good element to insert into the relationship there.
Great. And great question. Allowing her the space. Are you too angry to really have a conversation? Gives her the space to say yes, and then the open invitation to come back when you're ready. What other thoughts or insights do the rest of you have about what kind of a generative question might you ask? And especially if the person is still feeling somewhat triggered or defensive and not opening up, what's a more systems related question that you might ask? Anybody have any ideas? One question that you might ask is, it's kind of a simple, what would you like for our relationship? What do you want our relationship to look like in the future? And you might get a feedback that says, I really don't see that there's a future for our relationship, in which case, it's not going to, doesn't matter what you do, that she's not open to repairing the relationship because she doesn't see a future for it. And if she says something like, I'd like a future where we could somehow get back to where we trust each other, or whatever it was prior to what happened. And then you're in a conversation about how do we repair the relationship, as opposed to addressing what happened or didn't happen, and fixing things, or you were part of this too. It's like, this happened, period. What do we want going forward? And how can we repair that? How do we build trust again with each other? What needs to happen? And allowing her to start with what needs to happen for her, and then allowing yourself as well to say, and here's what needs to happen for me. The question about whether or not we have to get everybody to take their fair share of the blame for something often keeps us stuck in the problem, as opposed to, it doesn't matter, it happened. And of course, anybody who's in the dynamic was part of the dynamic, whether they want to admit it or not. But how do we go forward if we want to go forward?
Yeah, and Christina, or go ahead.
Go ahead. No, keep going. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I noticed you just wrote, when the person says everything's fine, that might be an opportunity to bring background into foreground, and to say, like, well, I'm noticing some differences. Like, we used to text every day, and we used to share with each other what was going on in our world. And now we're not doing that as much. And I miss that. Is that something you want again too? And again, and if she says, no, I don't at this point, a follow-up generative question could be like, well, what would have to be different for you to want that again? Like, could you imagine a possibility where that felt good for us to be that close again? What would need to happen? Is there something that needs repaired, or something different that needs to happen in our interactions? And then maybe they just say, well, I'm just too busy right now. I think that, like, you made a good point, Mom, is like, at some point it is hard where we put all the generative questions out there in the frame. And if someone isn't willing to respond, at some point, there is nothing we can do. And
yeah. And this took place almost a year, like around 8-9 months. So I had to let go. She already let go through through her actions. I let go with my words. And it was a 14-year, very close friendship.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is hard. And that happens. And you can always leave the door open by saying, if you will always be a friend of mine, and I'm here if you need me anytime, and leave the door open for her. Any other suggestions of scenarios, situations?
Julie said way back here that she had a work one that she could offer.
Great.
Julie, do you still want to do your work one?
Sure, thanks. This is one that it's been rotating through my head for several weeks now. And I work in a hospital, and I'm in this particular situation, am kind of in a project management role for a big hospital initiative. And we have meetings to check in on how things are going. And there's a particular manager that seems to really trigger me. And when I think about it, So for example, we were talking about some patients that needed to be discharged, and his comment was that he and his team were feeling very kind of questioned, like that they weren't doing their job, and then made some statements of like, no one is looking at like this piece of the process, which was not, I didn't feel was true. And so I just felt like very defensive. It was in a meeting with a number of people on Zoom, and I felt like I was kind of put on the spot to I felt like I needed to defend. And in hindsight, I can see that I could have done differently, but I'm still emotionally like heightened about it.
What would you have done differently now?
I think that I would have asked him, I probably assured him that like questioning whether people are doing their job is not the intention, but maybe asked him what he felt could change with what the work that we were doing, so that people felt heard. And I think I would more explore the like, what is he hoping for? What does he want in that situation for it to look differently?
Nice, great question. And then and privately offline, you could also talk with him and say in the, you know, as Lisa had said, sharing your frustrations or your feelings in order to build the relationship with him, offline with him, just one-on-one, to say, I just want to let you know that I really felt put on the spot in front of a lot of people. And next time, if there's something you feel like needs changing, please come to me immediately. Don't let it if you've got ideas for how things can be better, please share them with me right away.
Mm-hmm.
So just to let him know that whether it was a power play or not, responding the way you just suggested you would respond, if he was trying to make a power play, wouldn't have been successful. Instead, you would have opened it up to an organizational conversation. And then offline, you're also holding him accountable for a genuine, authentic relationship with you.
Yeah, thank you. I've thought a lot about what's happening for him in the system, and that perhaps he's feeling like there's a lot of people questioning him every day about why these patients aren't being discharged.
Yeah.
And that it's probably not about me. It's about all these processes and this system that he's probably coming in every day and feeling intense pressure. And there's a lot of things he can't control.
Great. And just asking him that exactly what you just said, I've been thinking about, your job, and I'm guessing that instead of making it up and believing it, saying this is what I'm making up, or this is what I think might be going on for you. Is that true? Mm-hmm. How do we work together to change that so that you don't feel that kind of pressure? Mm-hmm. Then he feels seen, he feels heard, and you make the system probably better, more effective for everybody.
Yeah. And I love how your energy, even Julie, was so different as you were talking about, like, it seemed like you were really in more of a connect when you were like, I can imagine this is happening, and you could kind of see the compassion. And I think there's something to just also giving ourselves grace, like in the moment when we're triggered, and it's like, oh yeah, like I wasn't able to respond in the way that I would have wanted to, because I was just hijacked like that. And that we can always circle back. It's like, hey, okay, I want to have a redo for that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. We're almost at 10 o'clock. Do you just want to share how the last slide of how they can get more?
Oh, yes. Oh, okay. Yeah. So here's how you could take your learning deeper if you would like to. Mom, do you want to say anything about the Monday Kickstarters?
Sure, we do 14 times a year. They're usually in 1 month segments. I mean, yeah, 1 month and there'll be 4, and then the next quarter there'll be 4 more. And Monday Kickstarters is simply a 30-minute session to do exactly what we were just doing in the last 25 minutes of this. People come in with a scenario or a situation, and they say, how can I reframe this? Or what kind of generative questions can I ask? And the third session of every Kickstarter session will be focusing on relationships. So the next one is on March 20th, and you can sign up for those sessions and join and do more of what we just did.
Yeah, and we'll send you an email with links to some of these things. There's also a longer conversations worth having training, and there's an on-demand, like at your own self-paced training, and there are also virtual training options, which you kind of dive deeper into some of these practices. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Laura does coaching in this area, so you can always connect up directly with her, especially if you have a specific thing you'd like to work on with your partner or with a significant relationship.
Yeah.
If you all could type before you leave, if you could just type into chat, what is one thing you're taking away from this session that you didn't have before you got here? One thing you're going to take and put into practice. And then we'll follow up, as Laura said, with links to these, as well as a link to the session if you want to see it again, or if you want to share it with someone else. Oh, I love that. Reminding myself to slow down.
Yeah.
Yeah, that asking myself questions to allow myself to like decompress.
Yeah, allowing my body time to process first. That's so big. Yeah, what are you hoping for in your relationships? How
Yeah, and that whole piece about expectations. Yeah.
Yeah, and the generative questions really help us get to the positive frame more easily, the more we can ask. Oh, the spider web analogy.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We're glad you were here. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Hi.
Thanks, everybody. Don't leave me out.
Hi, Lisa and DB. Oh, it was so good to